Welcome back, wannabes and creators, to another episode of The Business of Art, the podcast that demystifies business for artists. And today we have another live episode, this time at LosCon. LosCon is the first con that I ever heard about when I came to Los Angeles, and I've always wanted to check it out, and I'm so thrilled that I was finally able to. The Greater Los Angeles Writers Society had me out to take part in 2 panels, one of which I moderated and one of which I was a panelist. Today is the one that I moderated about editing and how to edit your manuscript, why editing is so important, when you know your manuscript is done, and when to send it off to an editor. We had 2 panelists, as well as myself, for this panel. Deanna Brady is a professional editor, a fantastic professional editor, and Leslie Ann Moore is not only the VP of the Greater Los Angeles Writers Society, but also a fantastic writer in her own right, publishing lots of fantasy and horror and beautiful books. Before we get on to that, I want to let you guys know that I have condensed all of my Kickstarter knowledge, things that have been around the web, on my blog, on my podcast, and even my course, and condensed it to one webpage. So you can find everything I've ever said on the subject of Kickstarter by heading on over to thebusinessofart.us/Kickstarter toolkit. That's everything I've said in blogs, podcasts, and even my course, all now conveniently on one page at thebusinessofart.us/Kickstarter toolkit. And every time I do something Kickstarter related, I do add to it. So this is a resource that will help you in perpetuity. Again, that's thebusinessofart.us/Kickstarter toolkit. And that being said, let's get on with the show. A reminder, this is a live episode, so the audio is janky is a pretty good way to describe it. Mediocre is another. But what's really important is the content. And in that respect, this episode is fantastic. So enough of me introing it, let's talk about it. Let's go, ladies and germs, and talk about how to edit your manuscript and how to work with an editor. For myself, I'm the host of Business of Art podcast. I also run Wannabe Press, which is a small press that makes weird books for weird people, in graphic novel and book form. So I guess I'm here as the publisher perspective on when to send things to an editor and when to definitely get an editor before you send it off to get published or publish yourself. And now
I'm Leslie Ann Moore, although everybody in this room already knows that. They already know who I am. And for the one gentleman who's walking in who doesn't know who I am, Leslie Ann Moore, Vice President of the Greater Los Angeles Writers Society. I have an award-winning romantic fantasy trilogy, the Griffin's Daughter trilogy. I guess I will come at this topic through the writer's perspective, not necessarily the editor's perspective.
this is a big intro for you. Like, look at how, like...
Yeah, I have to scream over it.
Now, what is going on over there?
I don't know.
I happen to know that both of us had some creeping crud last week of a cold.
I'm okay. Introduce yourself.
Yeah, so I still have the creeping crud part, but not the infectious part. So if I sound kind of funky, that's why. So anyway, my name's Deanna Brady. They didn't give us these little
How to know when to
cards.
edit your manuscript and send it to a person. There we go. Someone was yelling by what we're doing in here.
Okay.
All right, sorry about that.
Anyway, this is obviously going to be far less than formal. But
Yeah.
anyway, this is me. I'm Deanna Brady, and I am an editor, and I have been editing for literally decades. And I edit both fiction and nonfiction in all kinds of genre and all kinds of categories. Everything from, novels to nonfiction. Are you coming in to join us?
Yay.
I'm.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
yes, it
this
is.
the editing.
Yes.
Y'all are going to be so far ahead of everyone else. We're going to drop all the knowledge bombs.
Oh, goody, we have more people coming in. Yay!
Okay. So for the couple people that came in, we're going to sort of take questions throughout, if you guys have them. We will have questions towards the end as well, formally. But if you have something, before I ask questions to our wonderful panel, do you have anything that you would like to know? It's all right. Yeah.
No, actually, probably you start and it'll trigger
All right.
questions.
It's a little bit early. Everyone's a little bit timid at the beginning, so I'll ask a question to each of the panelists, and then maybe we after that we'll ask another one. So Leslie, on your side, I'm going to ask you a writer question.
A writerly question. Okay.
Which is, at what point do you turn your book over to an editor? How many drafts you do? What is your process for knowing that it's time to hire an editor?
She edits. She's a great editor. She
thank
edits
you.
her own work.
Well, thank you. Well, I think the general rule is when you have finished, the general rule to have finished the manuscript is, do you have a beginning, a middle, and an end, and does it all coherently hang together? I think at that point, you probably would have already written several drafts yourself. There's something called a vomit draft, which is the very first thing that you just get out onto the page. And the universal, the accepted common wisdom is that you don't edit during that time. You just let it, you just get it out there. You just write the story. And so, but there comes a time when you have a beginning, a middle, and an end, and it all coherently hangs together that you think, and that you have polished it to the point where you do not feel that you can improve it anymore.
Do you have a system for that?
I have everything all sort of formalized here.
I think as an editor, yeah, that's how I do it as a writer. It is that when my manuscript, when I don't think that I can improve it anymore, it's the best that I can make it, and that's going to be different for everybody. That could be your 5th draft, it could be your 13th draft. Then I say it's time to put it aside and hire a professional to then come in and do it. That's how I, as a writer.
All right.
Yeah.
As a writer myself, and then then the next question is going to go to you.
You know.
I'm a little more systematized in it. For me, I do a vomit draft, 5 edits, and then it's off to an editor every time. So if you want a system, it's going to be different, like you said, for every person. But for myself, I've written a lot of stuff, and I know if it's 5 screenplays, I send it then off to a manager and beta readers, or an editor and beta readers, and then once it comes back, I wait till all the beta reading is done, and then I come back. So if you want a little more that is structured approach, you can sort of, when you write enough or for long enough, you kind of, for me, I get a little bit of a system in place. So Deanna, you want to talk a little bit about?
I would like to just give you the benefit of something I prepared about the whole process of writing and editing your manuscript. But first, let me say that every individual writer is different, and you're all going to have your own individual, as they both said, your own individual way of approaching writing your first draft, or writing your book at all. So some people are planners, and some people are what we call pantsers, which is just doing it by the seat of your pants, starting with word 1 and ending up with word 100,000, and that's the typical vomit draft. Other people will outline first, so they have a real structure created first before they write their manuscript. So both of these general approaches are valid, and each of them, whether you use one or the other, depends upon what kind of thinker you are, what kind of writer you are, and how much you either prefer the sort of relative safety of having a plan before you go in, or the completely creative experience of just flying on,
by the seat of your pants.
By the seat of your pants.
Yeah, literally.
Yeah.
Well,
I'll say that
figuratively, by the seat of your pants.
As an author, I do both actually.
Right.
I've done this was planned, and I literally went from this planned outline, and I did this completely by the seat of my pants, and they exercise very different parts of my brain, but it is possible to do both.
That's the kind of right and left kind of manifestations of the brain. Right and left hemispheres work differently like that. But let me just give you this overview that I created, because I think it covers a lot of these questions. So what I wrote was, some of the best advice about editing can be useful even if you don't yet have a draft of your first book. You can follow some of the same steps before, during, and after creating a manuscript. You can also hire a professional editor at various points in the process to help you with various tasks while developing, writing, and editing your book. To know what you're aiming for, read every successful book you can in your own genre and category. That will tell you a lot about what sells, what people enjoy reading in general, and how successful books are structured and written. This is good advice whether or not you've written your own book manuscript yet. Right? Make sure to read everything you can about writing, either online or in books or both, including grammar and punctuation. Because if you create something that's incorrect, full of errors, a mess, you're going to have to live with it. It's going to be out there. If you publish it in any way, shape, or form, it's going to be out there representing you and showing that you were careless and didn't know what you were doing, which is not the way you want to represent yourself.
Forever.
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 Yeah. So. Because even if you take that back and alter it, somebody will have seen it already. Somebody may have downloaded it, made copies of it. It will be memorialized somehow. It's going to be there forever.
Before you go on, can we talk about something really quickly?
Sure.
Okay, so most people that come to me as a publisher or as a writer talk about the expense of editing is very expensive. It can be thousands of dollars, it can be hundreds of dollars. I specifically have one of my tenets is to make something once and then sell it forever. So you're going to make these things one time and then hopefully sell them for the next 30, 40, 50. Your kids will sell them, your grandkids will sell them. I think it's important to think about editing cost as something that you partake in one time. It's one-time cost. Hopefully you don't have to go back again and again. But you have that one-time cost, and you're able to amortize that over all of the books that you sell, which I promise you will be way higher than if you don't have an editor. Can you guys speak to that for a second?
Absolutely. I've got some of that in cool. My little overview here. If you don't, so you want to learn as much as you can about the process of writing and, grammar and punctuation. And if you don't want to attempt to memorize the Chicago Manual of Style before you write your book, get a copy of The Elements of Style. It's a little book by Strunk and White, and it kind of distills all of those things into a very short, digestible form that you can read and understand, and you will learn a lot about the kind of style that is standard and acceptable for book writing. You don't want to use AP, for example, Associated Press style. That is what you see in newspapers and magazines. You don't want to use that. You don't want your commas in those places. You want to use the Chicago Manual, because if you send your book to a conventional, traditional publisher and it is not edited consistently in the proper style, it'll be thrown out before they ever think about reading it. They'll just, put it in the circular file. Okay, whether or not you've written your first draft, you'll want to create a story outline and a short synopsis of the plot that includes major character descriptions, which will come in handy in every stage of development, writing, editing, and marketing. You'll need to rewrite that synopsis each time your manuscript changes. So you can use that synopsis to send to an editor, to show the editor what the bones, the skeletal structure of your story is, and a little bit about how the characters fit into that plot. And you can use it all the way through the development of your book, the writing of your book, and all the way through to the marketing of your book and the back cover copy. So that will stand you in good stead to have that. It'll also give you a page or more, if it's a long synopsis, to refer to as you're doing the writing and the editing, the rewriting, the redrafting, to remind yourself of where you are and where you want to head, where you're heading.
I like that you said one page and not 10 pages.
You can make a long synopsis if you want, but that one page is going to be a multi-purpose instrument for you over the life of your writing and editing and marketing.
I get treatments a lot that are 10 pages, sometimes with graphic novels, more words in the treatment than in the actual book itself.
which, people it will put people to sleep, and they won't make it
just don't have
through
the
it.
time.
It's not. Most of us don't have the time to. You can get very myopic about your own work, and you forget that other people aren't devoted to your work necessarily, that might need to be involved at some stage of the game. So when you've done as much work on the book as you possibly can without assistance or feedback, you might want to think about joining a critique group or some kind of writers group where you can then discuss your work with other writers. Make sure you join one where the other writers are supportive and professional in their approach, because you don't want to go in and just get beaten up arbitrarily for no good reason by other people who have, a bone to pick or their own egos involved. So you want a mutually supportive group. That's a really good way to get feedback and get a consensus opinion as you're writing or when you're finished, that won't cost you the kind of money that hiring an editor would.
Leslie, can you talk about that for a second before we go on? Because I know GLAWS has a lot of writers groups, and like what you should look for in a writers group, when you're joining one.
I think the most important thing about a writers group is that it is a professional group, not in the sense that it's professional writers, but that, I guess, more serious-minded. I think that's important, because there are a lot of groups out there, that meet-up groups and what have you. Oh yes, we're writers, and all they want to do is sit around and bitch and moan about their jobs or their families, or they're not really working on anything. You need to be in a group of people where you can actually feed off of energy of people who are getting things done, people who are moving forward with their projects, and so
can give constructive criticism.
Constructive criticism. And one of the great things about GLAWS critique groups is that our critique groups are all genre specific, and so people are not going to, if you're writing romance, you're not going to necessarily be thrown into the mystery thriller, with the mystery thriller people, or if you're writing memoir, you're not going to be thrown in with the sci-fi fantasy horror people. So that's important, is finding a genre-specific critique group where other people know the genre as intimately as you do, and they know all the tropes. They know the writers who are working past, present, and past and present, and it can give the feedback based on this intimate knowledge of the tropes, because there's nothing that irritates me more than I'll hear either an editor or I'll hear a writer or somebody say, well, that your book is that's so long. Like, why is your manuscript so long? You can't. It's 130,000 words. That's just too long. Well, yes, that would be too long if it was a mystery thriller, or that would be too long if it's a literary fiction book. But it's not too long if it's a fantasy, epic fantasy. So that's another thing about your editors, is your editors have to know. They have to know the genre. They can't just come in and you can't give your book, if it's an epic fantasy novel, you don't want to give it to somebody who does nothing but memoir or nonfiction. They're not going to get it, and they're going to give you the totally wrong advice.
What's great now is you can look on Amazon and find the editors of a specific books and reach out to them. But I know when I went to hire my editors for the first time, a lot of them, when I asked them for references, they just danced around it, and they wouldn't give like, I said, I need a reference for this kind of book. Like, it's a sci-fi, it's a grounded sci-fi, this kind of book. And they would say, oh, I work with all kinds of books. But they wouldn't give a specific title that I could look at and then go by and see what their things, what their like style was like. I think that what you said was so important. I have many different editors who do many different things for me. No one editor is perfect for every genre. And finding somebody. Well, finding someone who is specific to your genre, I think, is a great way to go. And one thing I want to say before I go back to Deanna about critique groups is one of the things that I like about critique groups and writing groups is it gets you used to taking notes, because it hardens you to taking notes.
Yeah.
Because an editor's job is to rip apart your book for the betterment of the book. And I'm now my fifth book, 10th book, so much dealing with editors for my own work. And it doesn't get easier when you open a thing to see them hate a section, or it doesn't, that like defensiveness gets into you.
I gotta say, when you're done, I want to make a comment on it.
All right. Well, so the critique groups are great because like they get you used to taking notes and knowing what notes are good notes and maybe what notes are bad notes, and knowing how to take notes, and then not incorporating all of the notes but just incorporating the right ones.
That's what I wanted to point out, is that just because an editor gives you notes, or just because the critique group partners give you notes, doesn't mean you have to follow them, because in the end it's your story. And if there's something you're really passionate about in the story, and your editor says, well, I just don't think it's working because this and this and this, and you say, well, I think it does work because of this, and you can't be afraid to just not take that advice, or stand up to the editor and say, well, no, I'm not going to change it because I happen to think it works for this reason. And so it in the end, it's your story. So you don't have to accept the notes.
That's the first thing that I tell my clients when we start to discuss the idea of perhaps my editing their work, is that this is their book. And what I do is give them suggestions. What I do when I mark their manuscript draft and, in Word, and make comments, or, make changes, is make suggestions. And they can choose to accept them or reject them. It's their book. And the other thing I wanted to say is, when you're talking about hiring an editor and looking at a work that they've edited for someone else and seeing what their style might be, or their voice, or however you choose to describe what the editor does, remember that a good editor edits in your voice, not in his or her own voice. And what I do is I give my clients a very thorough sample edit first. And they can take a look at that and see what I did. They can send me the first chapter of their book. The opening, the first page, is the most important part of your book. If you don't suck people in and engage them instantly, they're going to stop reading. And that includes both acquisitions editors at publishing houses, agents, and readers. The beginning of your book is the most important thing. So I ask them to send me their first chapter and a synopsis, or a step outline. That way, before I even read anything they wrote, I can look at the structure, the bones, the skeleton of that book, and see if it hangs together and will walk, and will stand up and walk on its own. Or whether it's going to crumble when you start trying to dress it with flesh and blood, So it's very important to find an editor with whom you're on the same page, so to speak, quite literally, and who can write in your voice. So when I give people a sample edit, they're going to see what I've done with their words. And even if I've made a ton of changes, because I'm a rewrite expert too, and I'm also a ghostwriter, but even if they see a whole page full of red, if they see the clean copy and they read it first, they should feel that it's their voice and their story. And then later, this is so typical of what happens when I do sample edits. People say, I read your clean copy and I thought you hadn't made any changes. It was just me writing. And then when I looked at the marked copy, I was in shock because the whole page was covered in red, And it should be unnoticeable what we've done in terms of what you're trying to communicate, your voice, your style, your story. It belongs to you. What I do is make it even more wonderful and make it not embarrassing when you want to send it to someone who you think might want to buy it, either to publish it or to read it, So I want to just finish up with what I wrote here, just to get this out of the way and give you an idea of the rest of it. If you find that you're having difficulties with story structure, plotting, or character development as you write and or rewrite, or if you're not sure about conflicting advice you may have gotten, that's one phase where you may want to hire a developmental editor, either to coach you or to do a manuscript critique, to give you some professional help to make the process easier and not to go astray before you get to the copy editing stage. So if there are elements of the structure that aren't working, or you're getting a lot of the same feedback, incidentally, if you go to a critique group or you have friends, relatives, whomever read, and you're getting 90% of the people who read it are telling you they have a problem with one thing,
You need to change
you
it.
need to change that thing. So when you're wondering if, whose opinion to take,
Yeah.
get more than one opinion and see if there's a consensus. That's important.
I will say, though, to caveat that, make
Yeah.
sure they are people that read the thing
Yes.
that you
Yes.
read,
Yes.
because
Yes. That genre.
yes, like I don't read a lot of literary fiction, and
Yeah.
I read mostly sci-fi and mystery and fantasy and horror. So like in those styles, I at least know the tropes well enough, especially in sci-fi and mystery and horror. But if someone comes to me with something that's not outside that purview, there's a very good chance that if you have 10 people who don't read your genre, and they all say the same thing, but you see it in all of these books, that you need to find people that are interested in that thing.
Let me also mention, though, about tropes, for example. In terms of crafting your book, make it stand above tropes. Don't lean back and rely lazily on those tropes that only people who read your genre will understand. Because if you up-level your book so that people who read literary fiction or some other genre can still understand it and still be, entranced by it and love it and enjoy it on some level, you're going to be in the superior level of that genre, from the get-go.
And you may sell more books.
You're going to sell more
Sell more
books.
books.
Because you're going to sell
Yeah.
books to people who say, I never read that genre, but
But
I
I
enjoyed
love
this
your
so
story."
much.
Yes.
That's what you want to hear.
Yeah.
Not just from the people, the dyed-in-the-wool genre readers. And the last couple things that I have to say about the whole editorial process are, once you have a first draft, put it away for a while before looking at it again. Days, weeks, however long it takes to just get refreshed and not have it in your brain constantly and in front of your eyes all the time, so that you're getting the impression that you've already done something you haven't even dealt with yet, because your brain is making, filling in the blanks for you. If you put it away for a while and then come back to it and look at it fresh, you'll be able to revise it more successfully, because you can be more objective about it. So you give yourself a better perspective on it. And then, as a corollary to that, please don't write one draft and think your book is done. Write 5 drafts. Every time you rewrite your book, you will see things that you can pull out and get rid of to make it more economical, tight, terse, tension-filled, and you will see areas where you thought you handled something but you didn't. You're just going to see new things, and you're going to be practicing the skills of writing, so that each time you do it, you will be better informed, and you will have learned more, and you will have refined your talents, and you're going to come up with a better book later. People think that, literature just comes from the ether through the author and out, as just, a fait accompli. No, it's a process. It's a process, and you need to process it. You need to give it time. You need to develop it, and the more you work, it's like the old joke, when the visitor to New York who sees a guy in a coat and tails carrying a violin case, an old guy walking down the street, and he says, "Excuse me, sir, can you tell me how to get to
Carnegie Hall.
Carnegie Hall, and
Yeah.
and the guy with the violin case says practice.
So the two big problems that I see in writers who come to trying is either they try and do one draft and then they're done, or they're stuck trying to do a 50th draft.
Yeah, really.
and
Don't make yourself crazy.
Right. So can you guys talk a little bit about the finesse between like the people that do one and the people that do 50 drafts, because neither is good. At some point, there's a logarithmic return on how good your draft's going to get.
That's when you need to hire an editor.
I think it just our manuscripts become our children. I mean, we become so wrapped up in them that sometimes you don't want to let go. You just can't let go, and you can always find something that you want to change. Always.
And even when you're through editing, like I still have.
Even when you're through. Yes.
I still have books that have been edited, and me and my editor work for a long time on it, and they get out, and there's still errors.
Yeah.
And it's like
Yeah.
you're only two humans. Like there are
Yeah.
two humans doing it. You send it to proofreaders, you send it to beta readers when it's done, and like it's 60,000, 100,000, 200,000 words. Like there's going to be an error every time you open a Random House book. There's an error.
And we all grow and we all mature and we all change constantly. We're human, and especially those of us who are creative humans. So your perspective is going to change as you mature and as you grow and as you change. So every time you look at that book, subsequently, whenever you reread, you're going to say, you know, I just wish I hadn't done that. I would like to change that now, but it's out there, you know.
It's hard to know though sometimes when to let go.
Yeah.
I think that's when people get into that cycle of they just never ever finish because there's always something they want to change. There's always some little thing to fix, and I think that just comes with experience of writing books. I think after your experience for a while, you just know, you kind of just know when it's time to let it go. I mean, I don't know if there's a hard and fast formula.
And that's why you need a really good editor. That's one of the reasons.
There's
The
a
business, before we get to that, if you don't mind, let me just read the last paragraph and
Okay.
I'm
All right.
done with this piece of paper that I put together. The business of writing is very competitive, and you won't often have a second chance to make a great first impression. You really don't want to publish or submit a manuscript that isn't clean, first-rate, and professional, and you can't unring that bell. When you've gone as far as you can with the work, and feedback from relatives, friends, and critique partners, that is when it's time to find a compatible editor for a thorough appraisal and line edit. You don't want to put stuff out there that isn't as good as it can possibly be. And you need the objectivity of a really good editor to tell you when that is.
Do you have a question?
Very often.
Sylvia?
Yeah, so when you start rewriting, do you start from the beginning paragraph by paragraph, or line by line?
You start where you start. We are all individuals. I'm not going to tell you have to start at word 1 and proceed to word 100,000. You do it the way you need to do it.
How do you?
I do. I start. I start.
Most people,
from,
I think, start at the beginning.
I start at the beginning, and then I.
Rewriting each paragraph, or just rewriting?
When I do it differently. And this is probably bad advice for beginners, but I actually edit as I go. Ow, you're not supposed to do that. But I do because I've just
Some people do.
I've just been writing long enough that I now just edit as I go. But when you're starting out,
I do too, but when you're new,
you get your vomit draft out, and then when I had my first vomit draft, yes, I then went back to page 1, paragraph 1, word 1, and I started reading it again, and I just went through it sequentially. I didn't jump around and do this part and that part. I just did it from start to finish. Second draft, third draft, I started again, start to finish. Fourth draft, start to finish. Fifth draft, start to finish. That's what I do.
also, you remember when I said your synopsis is going to change as
Yes.
you write?
Yeah.
As you write, you're going to be rewriting that synopsis
Yeah.
for every draft. And
Yeah.
when you do, you'll see the places that you have to go back in
Yeah.
again that have
Yeah.
changed, and you'll see how the structure has improved.
Yeah.
It's a whole process.
I don't know how you can write I mean, I don't know how you can edit without going to page 1, and it's only because of this. Usually what happens on page 1 or page 10 informs page 50, 60, 70, and 80.
I was gonna.
So I know people that do it, that they use Scrivener, and they like will do like chapter 4 and chapter 8 and chapter 10 and then chapter 3 and chapter 9, and I don't know how you can do that and keep a coherent structure, especially when you're first starting out.
Yeah.
The only way you can do that, or the only time you ought to do that probably, is if you get finished with the whole book, and while you're working on it, and when you go back to change your synopsis and reconcile it with the current draft, you realize, you know what, that business at the end of Act 2 is really bugging me, and it's not working, and it's not going to pull us all the way through, and then the end of the book falls down, and I need to fix that. And you know where you need to fix it. Then you can go back in and start fixing those global, those macrocosmic issues first, before you start a line edit at the beginning and go. Does everybody understand the difference in the levels of editing? There's copyright, there's a copy reading, there's proofreading, there's copy editing, and then you have more substantive editing, stylistic editing, developmental editing, content editing. These are all terms that some editors use one way and some use another. But they're going from a line edit, which is the microcosmic word by word level, all the way up to the macrocosmic level of a content or development edit, where you're talking about these overall structural aspects of your manuscript and the overall global character development aspects.
And you may hire two different editors, one for developmental and one for your line. And some editors only do one or the other.
I do both, but there are specialists who only do one or the other.
Actually,
I tend to do all of it at the same time. But.
Well, I could see a scenario where you even hire 3, because I have some that are good at copy editing and not great at proofreading, and then some that are great at development editing.
I'm not a proofreader.
So like there's like proofreading is a different skill.
Yeah, that's not editing.
Yeah,
Can you explain what a proofreader is versus a copy?
Yeah, so a copy editor is actually going through and changing sentences, structure, making sure everything flows correctly. A proofreader is going through and making sure your grammar is correct. So remember that Chicago style guide? They're making sure that your book hits that style guide. And I have editors who I love their copy editing. Like my book, all of the notes they give are perfect. And then I've hired them to also do proofreading, and it's a nightmare.
Most editors are not proofreaders, and you can have, an English teacher that you studied with as a kid do your proofreading at the end, because really it's to catch typos and little glitches and accidental problems that came up, and it doesn't take editing skills per se.
Right. It just takes someone who really knows the style guide you're going for. And then the copy editing is what we talked about. And the development editing is more, if anyone has worked in movies and television, those notes that you get when you do your script or synopsis, and making sure that it all works before you start the book, or when you have a big issue inside the book. The people that, like you said, do the big old macro edit.
That's content or development editing.
Right.
Light copy editing includes basic grammar, punctuation, spelling, basic sentence structure, subject-verb agreement, inconsistencies in tone, tense, person, and number, and modifier placement, stuff like that. Really the most basic kinds of things.
And you might go, and someone might quote you a price when you go editing, but then they're always going to want to see your book just to make sure, because these things have a different word count cost. So if a proofreader is 2 cents every 1,000, a copy editor could be anywhere from 4 for a light copy edit to 8 for a heavy. A development might be 10 or even more, but then you're only sending them less book to go with.
Some will charge by the hour, like the editor I've used charges by the hour.
I do too.
But I've worked with this person, and I just wanted to mention this before I forget. Once you find, I think, once you find a developmental editor, not so much maybe copy or proofread, but a good developmental editor is worth every penny you pay this person. Because if you have a good working relationship with this person, they're almost like your co-writer.
They're your writing partner.
They're writing partner.
They're definitely.
And you have to have good rapport with this person. They have to understand your story inside out, and they have to love your story as much as you do, and they have to be as invested in it. Otherwise, you're not going to produce the kind of work that you'll be proud of. And if you're constantly clashing heads with this person, butting heads, then it's time to find somebody different, because not only are you giving them your money, but you're investing your time, and you want to eventually produce a work that you're going to be proud of and that you're going to sell a lot of copies. And that your name's going to be on it. Their name isn't going to be on it. Your name is going to be on it. And you want to make sure that that's something that you can proudly hold up and say, yeah, I wrote this.
Yeah, you want an editor that's like your soulmate,
Yeah.
or your clone. That person is the person who loves your book the way you do, and who's invested in it that way.
And you're going to pay them
You're gonna pay
significantly more money. So let's say you went with the develop. So let's just talk numbers, right? Like, let's say someone charges you $100 an hour for development editing.
No.
What, $50, whatever. Like, $55 an hour was like a pretty decent thing that I found.
I don't
but let's
even
just
charge that much.
Let's just say 50 for the sake of this
Maybe
argument.
you should. Maybe I should.
You're a development editor. Like, they might do proofreading, but you're still going to pay the same $50 an hour because you're paying for their time. Like, you pay for their time on some level. So, like, do you really want the person who's dealing with the entire structure of your book doing something that most...
Right. Well, that's why I tell my clients, I'm not going to proofread your book.
Right.
When I'm finished, you proofread your book, and then you give it to somebody else to proofread your book, and you don't pay me, a fee that's for a line edit or something to try to proofread something that I've already rewritten or edited thoroughly, and therefore I'm not capable of proofreading it objectively because I've been there and been digging through it too much.
That's a great point that I want to talk about with both of you. Do you, when you send it out to editors, do you also get myopic about the books when you've worked with them for a long time?
Everyone does. That's why I like to start editing from the first word of the book and edit my way through it, even most of the time, even while I'm doing developmental work and content work on the way through, because I want my eyes to be completely fresh. Because the minute I've done 2 or 3 drafts of passes of editing, I've also become myopic, because I've read these same passages numerous times, and that's the way the brain works. Your brain, just as with you, the author, your brain is going to fill in the blanks, and you think you've done something when you haven't. You've just thought about it on the way through, let's say. Or you've read this before, and therefore you think it's been dealt with, and it really hasn't. The brain compensates. And so you can only be really fresh once,
Leslie, you do both the writing and the editing. Do you find the same thing where you get myopic when you're editing something else for somebody else?
Well, to be honest, I don't edit professionally, but I do edit my husband's work, and yes, I do. Like you said, you can only look at it fresh once. And then the second time, then it becomes it's now my story too. And so if a person can afford it, it might even be nice to, after you've worked so hard with another editor, maybe send it out to somebody else. I don't know.
Well, that's why I'm saying,
Yeah.
At the end, when you get it back from your editor, you want to read it again yourself, of course, to see what they did and to, tweak anything that got loose and wandered away, but also you want to give it to somebody who's just going to proofread it and see if there were any little errors that got introduced by accident, or little things that got missed that your editor is not going to be able to do. That's why I tell them I'm not going to proofread this when we're done.
I would go one further though, and I would say, if you can, give that finished edited manuscript to a proofreader who reads the genre, who really enjoys it, because then they can give you a third opinion. Okay, yep, I proofread it, and by the way, I love the story.
Right.
Or whatever. Or this part.
The expense of that is going to be
I know.
really.
I know.
But I mean, if you look at how professional books, like Random House, not that other books aren't, but like at Random House, you and your editor work together, and then that edited book goes to a proofreader or 2 or 3 proofreaders.
Right. But that's all in-house, and nobody has to pay for that over and over again. Those people work on an hourly wage.
Yeah.
You know?
Right.
So unless you're very wealthy, you probably won't be able to afford to hire a proofreader after your book's been edited.
I will say that
it'd be nice just to be able to afford a good editor. You know?
I will say that for the first 3 novels that I wrote, I had an editor, and one editor did everything.
That's what I usually do, is everything, but not really proofreading at the end.
And then I would send it off to beta readers and like
Right.
some people to proofread and make sure it was right.
Right.
But in my future books, I will assuredly put in an additional amount of money for a proofreader, even though it's an additional $150, $200 for 1 or 2, because my plan is to sell these books to retire on the sales of my books.
Yeah, if you can get a proofreader for a couple of $100 and you can afford a couple of $100 extra, by all means,
Right.
hire
Yeah.
one.
Right. So you had a question. I don't know if you still have it.
Oh, I was going to say something earlier when you were talking about going back and editing, but it's the reason that beginners have a problem with that is a lot of times they get up to like chapter 3 and they go, oh wait, the protagonist should be female. They go back and they edit 1, and then they get up to 2, and then they go, oh wait, I got to go back, and then so they rewrite chapter 1, and then they get up to 2, and then they might get up to 3. And after a while, they've written chapter 1 10 times, chapter 2
That's okay.
5 times,
That's
and
fine.
never ever finish
Not if they
the
don't
book.
finish.
Well,
Right.
if they never finish, it's not fine.
So one of the NaNoWriMo techniques is and I do this all the time, you use square brackets, because I don't ever use square brackets in fiction, unless my AIs are talking to each other, but that's, when I put in square brackets, I usually either write fix this or I write note, protagonist is female, and I pretend I made the fix, and then I just keep going. Because you might find out in chapter 10 that edit you were going to do in chapter 2, you don't want to do that edit anymore. Like maybe you were wrong. And you don't want to rework something that you're going to delete later on. So that's why the NaNoWriMo, one of the techniques is you just pretend you made the change, you just keep going. Because by the time you get the whole thing finished and you look at the whole of it, you might say, God, I thought I was going to redo chapter 1, but that's crazy.
That's one of the reasons I say make sure you start with a synopsis as early as possible, as soon as you really know what the structure of the book's going to be. Because every time you revise that synopsis, you're going to be revising it with the education you got while redrafting.
Yeah.
And so you're going to know more about the book as a whole, and you're going to see if there are holes, and if
Right.
there are glitches, and if there are problems in the macrocosm.
Yeah,
You
I
know,
had that
because
happen.
you've been so busy with the microcosm.
Yeah, I had that happen in my book I just finished a few months ago, where part 1 and 2 were written in third person, and part 3 I wanted to, I decided I wanted it all in first person, because all my novels are in first person, and I tried the third person thing, I don't like it. So I ended up having to go back and redo everything in first person for the first two drafts. But the trick that I use to edit all the time and make sure I get through the whole thing is it's not fair to the end of my book if I spend too much time on the beginning of my book. Like it's like I want to have enough time for the whole book. And if you love your characters and you love your story and you love your setting, for me, like I don't want to do 50 edits on the beginning and then 10 edits on the end, because like then you have an uneven book. And then you have an uneven experience where somebody really loves the first 10 chapters and hates the last 20, and then they're less likely to buy your next book. I'd rather have a book that is consistently good than a book that has 1 chapter of great and then 19 chapters of mediocre. I don't know, that's just me.
That said, what I said right at the outset still stands, which is if you don't catch your readers and your buyers in the first page or the first couple of pages, they're not going to keep going with it. Somebody standing in the bookstore, thumbing through a copy of your book and skimming the first page, if they're not gripped by it, they're going to put it down and, go to the next possible thing that they might love. You're not going to get it. So really, you absolutely need that first page and that first chapter to be spectacular.
I think what he's saying is that you can't just...
You don't want your book to be uneven.
You can't just say the first chapter is going to be spectacular and then, I can just...
You can't. The rest of the book you can't give up on.
Yeah.
It has to... So many books and films and projects of all kinds of literature and, creativity fall down in the third act. And then end in the second act too. And then end in a very unsatisfying, emotionally frustrating way. You don't want that to happen. So of course you want to give as much attention to the project in its entirety as it needs.
Most people, Amazon ran a study, and Kindle. They found that Kindle, the average read through of a Kindle stopped at 30%.
Yeah.
They stopped at 30%. And have you ever read The Brief Wondrous Life of Oscar Wilde? So I loved that book for the first 100 pages and hated it for the next 400 pages.
Yeah.
And that's what makes me not...
I don't agree.
Well, that made me not want to read any of his other... I loved her other books. Because I was like, I feel betrayed by this first part of this book that didn't hold up to the rest of the book, in my opinion. Everyone's got another opinion.
Everybody, and everything's personal. Like, who is it? Leslie, what is it? Almanac of the Dead. Does anybody know that book? Marmee and Silko. It's a brilliant book, and it got the most fantastic reviews and everything. And I got about halfway through it or 2/3 of the way through it, and I thought, I'll finish this later. It's still sitting there years later. I never did get to the end of the book. And I'm a maniac about Native American literature. And it just lost, because I'm Indian, but it just lost me at a certain point. It got so congested and complex, and so I just kind of got so frustrated with it. So it's not just, genre. Well, this is a highly literary, highly lauded and critically praised book, award-winning book. It can happen in any book, but be really careful with that you don't end up with knots in the middle or something that just goes down the slippery slope and dies at the end, Obviously, you want your book to be the best it can be from start to finish.
Of course. Does anyone not hired an editor because they fear that the person who reads it's going to hate it? In the past, anybody? Huh?
Huh?
I said I haven't hired an editor, so...
Oh, yeah. Well, as I say, you have to feel that person is your soul partner, You really have to feel comfortable with that person. So, talk with them, have a discussion about the book, or, even, with my clients, many of them, I've never even spoken with them more than once on the phone. And they're in Australia, or they're in, Boston or somewhere, and we're working over the internet and using email, and we're sending drafts back and forth to each other. But still, you can feel the heart connection, and you can feel that, they can feel, I know, from the kinds of feedback that I get, that I know where they're coming from, and that they feel that I'm speaking in their voices.
I just want to share a problem that I had with working with the editor of my New Tierra Chronicle. I had a big fear that there might be a line crossed where I was no longer the sole author of the book, and my editor was. Where does that line cross? Where I am no longer the author of the book, but now I'm a co-author, and I now feel like I need to give this person writing credit. That this person now their name has to go on the book too. When does it not become my book anymore? Because of the amount of changes that he was suggesting, and I'm thinking to myself, well, if I do all of these changes, then I'm going to have to give this guy credit. He's going to have to be the and I know.
But you don't have to.
I know.
And I start out
I'm not
with a
saying-
contract, with
I'm
an
not
agreement
saying-
that says you are the author of this book, even if I completely rewrite it, even if I have written the majority of the book, it's still your book.
That's my point, is that fear, I think a lot of writers, maybe beginning writers or just starting out, maybe have that fear of, well, if I make all these changes, then it's not my book anymore. It's now mine and hers, or mine and his, and I feel like this person is actually wrote half the book for me, and now I can't take credit for it.
But some people don't want that, or they're fine
Yeah,
with it.
no, I know.
It's an individual circumstance.
I'm just saying,
you
for
know.
me,
So-
I wrestled with that.
Yeah. Well,
1, 2,
and some people don't
3.
need that heavy an edit. Yeah.
It's a comment more than anything else. What was hard for me to accept, my editor loves my stuff. What was hard for me to accept was because, I'm insecure, was reading through her changes and great comments, and I did like 7 drafts, and she still found shit that I missed. And taking the comments in the context that they're meant to make my story better, and not feeling like I'm a failure, because all she's trying to do is make my book better. But that was hard for me, especially with the first one, because it was like, oh my God, how did I miss this?
Can I ask you guys a question? You two on the panel a question. So my editor knows I'm very insecure. So
I think we all are.
so she will like intentionally like make sure she makes positive comments in the script, so that like every 10th or 11th comment is like, I love this. Do you do that, or does your editor do that? In your...
I don't, but I write a preliminary email saying, attached is the first pass of the first half of this draft is whatever. Please don't be offended by the changes I've made. It's your decision whether or not you accept them, and none of them are meant to denigrate your work or to tell you that you're not good enough. And I love the book, and these are my suggestions only. You're the author,
Yeah. I mean, my buddy works at Random. My buddies, I have buddies that write for Random House and HarperCollins, and you think that any editor that you get independently is bad,
those people are heartless.
They rip you apart.
Heartless.
They're like, I gave you an advance. I'm ripping this whole third act out, and you need to slap that thing in. So when I learned how brutal they were, I was like, oh, well, these guys are getting paid a lot of money to write this book, and even they're getting their hearts ripped out. So
even more callously and cruelly.
Right.
Except when they get to be a certain level.
And then they just don't even edit.
And then nobody edits it anymore.
Nobody edits
I
their work.
can think of some
big
authors in our
So
own
can I.
favorite genre
Yes.
who really, really needed to be edited, and they are not anymore.
Right.
and they really should be.
And they really should be.
So
It was more of an anecdote to your question about editing. I took a YA fiction course because I've written a lot of fiction, but I was trying to make a piece that was YA. And the first day in class, one of the people stood up and said, oh, I have to give my work to other students to read. And the instructor said, yes, and you have to give it to me to read as well. He said, oh, that's a deal breaker, and he left.
all right, 1, 2.
It was interesting the comment that you made about how we might feel about specifics with the editor's comments. So I've just written my first story, and it was in screen format, script format. And I don't know, maybe the rules are different with script consultants, but he gave me what I assume were examples in a few places on how I might change things, but I just assumed that don't copy his example, just kind of get the idea. But you're saying that just go ahead and incorporate the changes would be okay, or?
No, only if you want to.
It's up to you.
It's up to you.
So you're saying it's an option. It's
Yeah.
awkward.
Yeah,
I can't
as
do
I
this,
say,
'cause that's his.
the changes I make are all suggestions only.
Yeah.
They're not permanent. That's why we have the wonderfulness of Microsoft Word.
You can if you like this
drafts.
person's changes, you can use them. They're giving them to you.
Okay. That's
Yeah.
So
that was
yeah,
thinking.
you can use them word for word if you want to.
I thought, like, I can't do
Yeah, you're hiring me for my suggestions, and you can take them
And-
or you can reject them.
And that's where I was struggling with, because I was thinking to myself, well, if I incorporate his changes word for word, and like half the book now are his words, not mine, then this doesn't feel like my book anymore. It feels like our book.
Right.
So
And sometimes it is, and with some authors, that's fine. They love what you did, and that's what they want. And with other authors, they'd rather do it their way and not accept all your suggestions, even if they think your suggestions might even be better than what they originally wrote, because they feel proprietary about it. But it's up to you.
I have been working for a long time in like movies and television, and like no words are precious to me, so it was easy for me to like take all of their words and like just like do whatever. Like when I send it to a producer, it's like they go like, and then they change it and they mark it up and they put the thing they want to. So like, but you are allowed to do that.
That's one of the reasons.
So, sorry, I have one and then two there, and just please finish your comment.
That's one of the reasons you hire an editor. Is it's really hard to kill your darlings. It's really hard to slaughter your own words and to jettison them, and it's hard to be objective about them. These, as Leslie was saying, these are your babies, and you can't really look at it and say, that's ugly, I'll take that out, and it's not easy. Here, let me slice your ear off, because it's just.
Some of my most beautiful turns of phrases, my editor immediately was like out, and I was like, oh, she's right.
It's
but
painful.
It's like, it's
really
right, but I spent
painful.
so much, this is such a brilliant thing. And her note was, this is nice, but it's way too precious. This character would never say. And I was like, I know.
It's true, but you
love
save
it.
that and give it to someone else, another character later
Right.
to say.
Right,
You
okay,
know,
so one.
for whom
and
it's
then-
appropriate to say that thing.
So one and then two.
You never lose any of your writing because of the miracle of Microsoft Word. You have every draft that you ever did and every word that you ever wrote available to you. You can use it later for something else. Just because it doesn't work in this spot, in this project, or for that character or whatever, doesn't mean you can never use it again. So, it's best to thicken your skin a little and not hold on for dear life to the point where you wreck the overall impact of your work because you can't let go of any of it.
We're all just trying to, it's a team effort, right?
Yeah,
Leslie? Like,
exactly.
it's me and you trying
Your
to
editor
get,
is your team
Yep.
mate.
we're all trying to get the best work out there, because the editor, I'm sure you as an editor want to look at the book and be super proud of it also, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. Okay. Yes.
One of the problems I'm running into is, I've got the work, and today I'm quite happy with it. I've done all the changes I wanted to do, and I go to sleep and I wake up. Yeah, there's something else. I gotta do this.
Dreams and
And that
sleeping
keeps going.
are a
And that
very
keeps
creative
and that
process.
keeps going. And then a year later of this stuff, oh my goodness, this has to be because it's a consequence of that, because it's a consequence of that, and I would never have seen it, and the thing would have been fatally flawed if I hadn't waited this year of constant innovation.
That's why I say after you write a draft, put it in a drawer for a couple of weeks. Put it away for a month if you need to get some objectivity.
And the second one of the things I'm seeking, especially with the short stories that I'm doing, is a way of getting a new, fresh view on the thing. So what I call robot read, which is text-to-speech, because the thing reads the thing down, and that will eliminate some of the, I thought it was there, I thought I wrote that, but the robot says da-da-da-da-da-da-da. The other one, of course, is reading it aloud. The other one is throwing it through a grammar checker, anything whatsoever to get a new, fresh, you can only see your work fresh once, but you can try to get another angle on it.
And as you rewrite and as you redraft, try to eliminate as many words as you can with each draft, because economy will give you much greater tension and impact. always.
I was listening to a podcast, and he was saying, I think it was Austin Kleon, but I can't remember 100%. But he was saying when he sends his draft to an editor, it's 100,000 words, and when he finishes with his editor, it's 50,000 words.
I find that chasing the word "that," which is the one I most often use, and eliminating it gets me a fresh view and gets it tighter.
But sometimes you need the word "that."
Oh yeah, yeah.
So you have to measure it in
all of them,
in
but
context.
I'm considering each
Yeah.
one, and
I agree with that.
Okay. All right. So thank you for waiting patiently so long.
So, Leslie, I went for Russell. So, would you mind sharing what you did in the situation with the editor that you were afraid of that it might be?
Oh,
Did you take their suggestion?
I did. I just got over that fear, and I just went with it, and I was so glad I did, because it turned out that he was spot on just about everything. Like I took I'd say 98% of his changes I made, and the 2% I was able to. It was because he didn't quite understand what I was saying, and then I changed a little bit to make it more clear, and he's like, "Oh yeah, okay, I understand what you're doing now."
Was this style? Or was it content?
He didn't have any trouble with my style at all. It was all content, yeah, all developmental. So yeah, he did not try to change my style at all. No problems with that. It was the development of it, and I did, and I did not regret it, and I'm working with him again. I always want to work with this guy through the entire series. I want to keep him as the same editor to maintain continuity of the style.
But it isn't always development. Sometimes it's diction. Sometimes it's the languaging in one sentence. Sometimes it's the syntax. And you look at it and you think, why didn't I write? As an author, why didn't I write it that way to begin with? My brain, got it very convoluted, and the editor just simplified it and reduced 15 words to 5, and it's clear as a bell and works much better than overwriting. One of the greatest problems I run into with a lot of my clients, who are, especially the ones who are newer authors, is overwriting. And an editor can really help you reduce the clutter and get to the meat and the impact,
And Russell, you mentioned beta readers. Like, how many did you use, and do you have those before you go to the editor? Or?
So usually I wait until I do the first edit to do the beta read. So that all comes through. So the editor's notes, and then like 5 or 10 beta readers' notes all come through. And then I like waiting at least a month, maybe 2 or even 3 between doing an edit, so that the editor even gets a fresh take on the script, on the thing. My editors hate it, but I insist on it anyways. So like I want as many, so I can see the editor's notes are 1, and then everything that complements it is a check mark, and everything that's not complemented I try and incorporate in if I can. So beta readers are because you're not paying them generally, they're incredibly flaky. So let's say I have 50 to 100 in a beta read pool, and let's say of them 20 to 30 say yes, of which I might get 5 or 6 yes notes, actual notes that have read it. Some people request a little more time, some people, but at the end of the day, I'll be lucky if 5% of the people that are in my beta read pool actually give me notes on a book.
How do you find those people?
Sometimes they're friends. I write a lot of books, so I have a considerable amount of fans who I trust now. Some of them are old editors who may not be for this project, but I reach out to them. Some of them are reviewers who've reviewed my stuff before, but they're not reviewing actively anymore. So, but they still like to read. And I think when I read their review, I said that was they got it. So I go back to them. It started with just friends and family that I trusted that read this kind of genre that I liked, and I asked nicely, and they said, Yes. It started with like 10, and then now it's like it's ballooned up to, like 50 or so.
The last science fiction book I edited, I worked really closely with the author on story development as well as the actual line editing and all of the above. And in between a couple of major passes that I did, we talked about it and decided we wanted to throw it out to a couple of betas and see what they thought about certain things that we had reworked and reworked a few times together. And I found a couple of friends of mine who thought they might enjoy reading something in that genre, and a couple of them that already knew that they enjoyed the genre, and they read it and they gave us some feedback, and it was very interesting. There were a couple things that were consistently pointed out, and it gave us both food, and a resource to work from, and it turned out to be a really good decision to make. So I have no ego about a beta reader reading stuff while I'm doing editing, while I'm in between passes or whatever, if it seems like a good idea, because we're doing a tremendous amount of restructuring and development work,
Yeah, I've never had a scenario where I went to an editor and then a beta reader, and that pool of beta readers didn't find something that me and the editor missed. In fact, I've never had two people read the script and not have two different people find something that I should try to address or think about addressing. I had one of the main characters dies very early in the script, and 5 people said they loved it and 1 person said they hated it, and so you have to like parse all that stuff out. But like to me, I'm looking for the consistencies and
Right.
even the errors of like what nobody else saw.
Yeah, and you don't have to take everybody's suggestions or believe everybody's criticism, but if you have certain consistency in the feedback that you're getting, that's a flag that says, this spot might be problematic.
So the difference between when I edit and when I send it out to beta readers is that with beta readers, I'm looking for feelings, because like my mother, she doesn't know necessarily why she doesn't like a section or a character or that something's unclear. She just knows that this part is unclear for some unknown reason, and so I send things of like, how is the structure? Like 1 to 10. How is the pacing? 1 to 10. Are there any specific places where you felt like awkward or that didn't work? And so like they don't usually give me like, here is the reason, this sentence right here.
No. That's what I ask of beta readers. Tell me about clarity and inconsistencies,
Right.
principally, and tell me if there were spots where you were bored.
Where do you put the book down?
Yeah, where you put the book down.
Right.
Write down a list of the pages where you put or the passages where you put the book down, to go to the bathroom even. Then I'll know the spot where it slowed down a little bit, and it just informs you of so much.
Yeah, so like people are very intuitive, especially if they read books. They're very intuitive that something is wrong. They are very poor at expressing what that thing is, which is like, they're also very bad at writing books, because I'm trained as writing a book.
Right.
They're very bad at editing because you're a trained editor. You also had a question, and then we need to get to wrapping.
A couple of comments, actually. For me, the entry into a story that I'm writing starts with the very first line. And there's a promise and an interest established in the very first line. So if I say to you, I just had to kill her, you're interested in reading the next line. Or if I say to you, the woman in the coffin was not his mother, you're interested in reading the next line. And as that first page develops, it sets up a promise for the entire story that has to be fulfilled by the end. And I keep hearing the stuff every time at a GLAWS meeting or whatever about vomit rights, just throwing the story out and then going back and editing it. Well, sometimes you get a monstrosity, and it's better to throw that shit away and rewrite from the top. Because if you have a good starting point, you can work your way through the story, and writing is rewriting. So if you start the next time rewriting what you've written the day before, you'll find you can advance the story, and you're sort of editing as you go through it, because rewriting is a form of editing. Okay? When your editor says, there's a problem here, I suggest this, if it's by way of a story term in development, You don't have to accept that story turning development. You can see what the problem is that was identified and say, well, maybe not that, but this. Right?
All right, so we need to work towards, I believe, wrapping up. Yes, we need to work towards wrapping up. I'm going to go first and tell you what I tell everybody. Give you the 2 reasons why you should buy a book from everyone on this panel. The first is that we make a living selling books and editing things. So like we do these panels for free because like we believe in helping the community, but we make our living on books. That has never gotten one person to buy a book. So that's my selfish thing. Let me tell you the selfish reason why you, as the audience, should buy a book. We just spent the last hour giving you a bunch of advice on editing and writing. You kind of want to do your market research to see if what we're saying is a big load of crap, right? Like market research is a huge part of owning a business. And by reading our books, you know whether we are good at the job that we do or we are bad at the job that we do. And if we are good at the job that we do, you can put a little star next to all the comments that we made, all the things that we said, and said, this guy probably knows, or the woman knows what we're doing. If you do not, if our books are full of edits and holes and horrible, probably to discount the things that we said. So our selfish reason has never gotten one book sale. But for you guys, it absolutely is essential that when you get advice from somebody, you go and do your market research to see if it is advice that is worth taking. That being said, 2 of you?
Well, I guess in closing, as coming from the author's perspective, it's never a waste of money to hire a really good editor. If you don't have the good fortune to be with a traditional publisher will provide you with editorial services. That's always great. But for a lot of us, self-publishing is going to be the only way we're going to get our work out there. And just find someone that you really have a good rapport with and stick with that person, at least through a series. If you can keep the continuity through at least if you're writing a series. So.
And shop around, like before, right?
And don't be afraid to fire your editor if you're not getting along with them. If they just don't get it, don't be afraid to fire them.
I don't have a book to sell, but I'm a really good editor. So if you need one, talk to me. I'll be happy to give you a business card.
And you do sample edits, right?
I do. I do free sample edits. And you can talk to me about all the aspects of your work, before the fact, and make sure that, I'm the right person for you. But let me just say, regarding editing, I say this not to be self-serving, because you could go with a different editor and not pick me, There are a lot of terrific editors around, but just if you're going to, whether you're going to self-publish or you're going you want to find a traditional publishing house, you're going to need an absolutely terrific draft. There's tremendous competition. You're going to need your final draft that you submit to be the finished, polished, perfect book. Or one of 2 things will happen. Either you will get nothing but rejections and you won't get another chance to submit to an acquisitions editor, or if you're self-publishing, it'll be out there for everybody in the world and all your progeny to see for the rest of your life and after it, and there won't be anything you can do about that. You're going to have something that's not perfect and not wonderful, and it's going to be too late to fix. So I suggest that if there's any way you can possibly afford to have a professional editor look at your work at some stage of this whole process that we've been discussing all this time, please do. Even if it's just to give it, a final manuscript evaluation at the end. So we're only going to pay, let's say, a few $100s just to get some feedback. before you put that out there, make sure that it's the best it can possibly be. And if I can reiterate that even more, you know, and just impress upon you how important it is, you know, it couldn't be more urgent.
That $1,000 or however much the editor costs is going to feel like a lot now. It is a lot now. It's never not a lot.
It's a lot. Oh, sure.
It's a lot. But,
not for the editor, because
yeah,
we don't get paid
right,
that much, actually, if you know, parse that out.
The amortization cost of every year you can sell that book is very low. It's $100 after 10 years. So it's, after 20 years, $50 a year. Every year you're able to sell the book. Every year your nephew can sell the book after you're dead, after your grandchildren, whoever. Every book is its own product. This is a product. This is a Big Mac, a Whopper, a McFlurry, whatever you want to consider it as. You want to make that product the absolute best you can. You want to have a good cover. You want to have good words inside, because not only, this is not just one thing. This is every other book that you have.
That's what I was going to say.
You know, Leslie
it's not
has
just
series.
about this book. You're going to learn so much working with an editor, and you're going to give yourself the chance of getting published and getting read, so that you will then be able to write more than one book.
The acquisition cost is the highest when someone doesn't know who you are. So once you have somebody who is in your audience who is willing to read your book, you sure as shoot want them to read every other book that you have, because you found one person. If you don't have an editor, or you don't have a professionally edited book, I don't do series, I do own individual pieces for the most part, but when someone comes to a convention and they buy one book, sure as shooting I want them to come back and buy the next book, and the next book, and the next book, because that's how writers build their careers, by the library of back catalog that they have.
Yeah.
It is, every time you release a book, you should increase the sales of every other book that you have. When you release, whether it's a series and you do 4 books, you know, your 4th book, you should get 1, 2, and 3 should increase, or you're more like Kurt Vonnegut and he has like different things like I am. Every time you release a book, you should get everyone in that old audience and the people in your new audience. And so this is what editing does. Editing allows you to have the best product for your first book, or your second, or your third, or your fourth, or your 9th book, so that the next time someone goes, oh man, I need a new book. I wonder what, instead of saying I wonder what Stephen King is doing, or I wonder what David Baldacci, who, like, the only thing that's in between me and him, or us and him, is track record for a long length of time. They say, man, I wonder what Russell's doing, or I wonder what you're doing, I wonder what Leslie's doing, because they know that you are synonymous with quality. And when they pick up a book, they are not going to be disappointed. They may not love the book, but they will love the quality of the experience.
Yes. And chances are you're only going to get one chance to make that impression.
Yeah.
I can verify that. I've been a bookseller for more than 2 decades, and nothing excites back title sales of an author as a hot new book by that author.
Yeah, you can actually track this on Amazon. I don't know if you guys have ever done it, but it's always weird how about 6 months before a book releases, their current book goes down to about 99 cents for the first one, and like $4.99 for the second one, and maybe $9.99 for the third one. And it's so that people buy the first ones and pre-order the 4th one. And it's the same in any writer's life. From the business perspective, all you have is the books you've put out and the book you're going to put out. And if you hire an editor and you put good cover and you market to the right audience, your audience will grow over time. It may not be great the first one, even if it's the greatest book of all time. But by the time your 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th book comes out and you have an audience assembled, you're going to find that your back catalog books are really what is supporting you. Like not the one that's about to release. That one is a release fantastically, because it helps all the other books come out. There's authors that sell like 10,000 copies of ebooks a month because they just have that massive goodwill to their audience. And that's because every time George R.R. Martin puts out a book, man, that thing's edited and like it's right for that audience. They don't have to worry that like it's got gaping plot holes. And that's what you want to create when you're talking about your own career. A little investment on the front, large payoff on the back. So that was the Greater Los Angeles Writers Society panel on editing your manuscript and how to work with an editor. Did you like it? If you did, I hope you comment. And if you really liked it, I hope you go over to thebusinessofart.us/iTunes, subscribe, rate, and review to the podcast today. It's the best way to help us find new people to help and to make sure you don't miss any of our fabulous content. We put out at least 2 shows a week, so there's a pretty good chance if you forget for a while, you're going to be deluged with our content of things you missed. So head on over to thebusinessofart.us/iTunes or head on over to iTunes on your phone or web browser today. Rate, review, and subscribe. Thanks so much, wannabes and creators. Have a great day.